first time I heard the footsteps. It was 2:36 in the morning. At first, I thought it was my imagination. The house was completely silent, the way it always was at night. No traffic outside, no neighbors talking, no TV playing in another room, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. And then, a slow, deliberate creak from the hallway floor. I froze instantly. My eyes stayed locked on the ceiling above my bed. I listened carefully. Maybe it was just the house settling. Old houses make noises all the time. I waited. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. Then I heard it again. Step, 2 more footsteps. Slow, heavy, moving down the hallway. My heart started beating faster, because there was only one problem with that sound. I lived alone. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and checked the time again. 2:36 a.m. The house should have been empty, completely empty. But the footsteps continued. Step, moving closer to my bedroom door. For a moment, I couldn't move. Every nerve in my body felt frozen. Then I whispered to myself, someone's in the house. 3 months earlier, I had moved into the place. It was a small one-story house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Colorado. Nothing fancy. Just a simple 2-bedroom home with wooden floors and an unfinished attic. But it was perfect for what I needed. Peace, quiet, and space to work. I worked remotely as a software developer, which meant I spent most of my time inside the house anyway. Coding during the day, gaming, or watching movies at night. The solitude didn't bother me. In fact, I preferred it. No loud neighbors, no roommates, no distractions. The house itself was older, probably built sometime in the 1970s. The previous owner had renovated most of it, but some parts still felt aged, especially the floors. They creaked sometimes when you walked on them, but never like what I heard that night. Those footsteps sounded deliberate, like someone carefully walking down the hallway. The strange thing was, nothing about the house had ever felt unsafe before. The neighborhood was quiet. The doors had strong locks. The windows were secure. And I had checked everything carefully when I moved in, because living alone makes you cautious. Still, I had developed a routine. Every night before bed, I walked through the house checking that everything was locked. Front door, back door, windows, garage. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed. That night had been no different. At least that's what I thought. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath. The silence that followed felt even worse than the sound, because whoever had been walking was now standing directly outside my room. I stared at the door, waiting, listening. My phone screen lit the room faintly as I tightened my grip around it. Should I call the police? Should I yell? Should I run? Before I could decide, the doorknob moved, just slightly. A tiny metallic click. My heart jumped into my throat. Someone was trying to open the door. I slowly slid out of bed, trying to stay quiet, trying not to make the floor creak. The footsteps had stopped, but the presence outside the door was undeniable. I could feel it, that instinctive feeling that someone was standing on the other side, listening, waiting. Then suddenly, the doorknob stopped moving. Silence again. A long, heavy silence. Then the footsteps returned. But this time, they were moving away. Step, walking back down the hallway. I stood there in the dark for almost a minute, my mind racing, trying to understand what was happening. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe they thought the house was empty. Maybe they didn't know I was home. The footsteps reached the end of the hallway, then stopped again. Another creak, but this time, it came from the kitchen. My heart started racing again, because the kitchen was where the back door was. I slowly approached my bedroom door. Every step felt louder than it should have. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just silence again. After a few seconds, I unlocked the door slowly, my hand shaking as I turned the knob. Then I opened it just an inch. The hallway was dark, empty. I stepped out carefully. My phone flashlight lit the floor ahead of me. The hallway looked normal. exactly the way I had left it before going to bed. I walked toward the kitchen. Every creak of floor made my heart jump. When I reached the doorway, I stopped. The back door was wide open. Cold night air drifted inside the house. The curtain above the sink moved slightly in the breeze. My stomach tightened. I knew I had locked that door. I always locked it. I stepped closer and looked outside. The backyard was dark, just a faint outline of trees and the wooden fence. No movement, no one running away, nothing. I closed the door quickly and locked it. Then I checked every other door and window in the house again. Everything else was secure. No broken glass, no force locks, no sign of how someone could have gotten inside. Eventually, I convinced myself that maybe I had forgotten to lock the back door. Maybe someone had tried to break in, heard me moving, and ran away. That seemed like the most logical explanation. At least it helped me sleep. But the next night, at exactly 2:36 a.m., I heard the footsteps again. And this time, they were coming from the attic. The footsteps in the attic stopped as suddenly as they started. I stood in the hallway staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding so loudly it almost drowned out every other sound. For a moment, I told myself it had to be something else. Maybe a raccoon or a squirrel. Old houses often had animals in the attic. That had to be it. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, because animals don't walk like that. Those steps had been slow, heavy, deliberate, exactly like the ones in the hallway the night before. I looked at the attic hatch in the ceiling. It was a small square panel above the hallway closet, the kind you had to pull down with a hook to reveal a folding ladder. I had never opened it before. In fact, when I moved into the house 3 months earlier, the real estate agent had told me the attic was just storage space. Nothing interesting up there. Just insulation and old beams. But the sound I had just heard told a very different story. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway suddenly filled with a cold white glow. The attic hatch looked perfectly normal. Closed. Still. Then suddenly, creak. A faint shift above the ceiling. I froze. Something had moved again. My throat felt dry. Hello? I called out. The word echoed awkwardly through the house. No answer. No movement. Just silence. Part of me wanted to call the police right then. But another part of me kept thinking the same thing. If it was just an animal, I'd look ridiculous. So instead, I grabbed a broom from a closet. Not exactly a weapon, but it was the best thing I had nearby. I climbed onto the hallway chair and reached for the attic latch. My hand was shaking. The metal hook scraped slightly as I pulled the hatch open. The attic ladder dropped down slowly with mechanical creak. Dust drifted through the air as the panel opened. Cold air spilled down from above. I pointed my phone flashlight upward. The beam barely reached the top. Just wooden beams. Insulation. Dark shadows. Nothing moved. No sound. No animal. No person. I stood there for a moment debating whether to climb up. Every instinct in my body said don't. But curiosity is a powerful thing. And if something really was up there, I needed to know. So I started climbing. Each step of the ladder creaked under my weight. The attic smelled dusty and old, like wood that hadn't been touched in years. When I reached the top, I slowly lifted my head above the floor. The flashlight beam swept across the space. Boxes, old boards, and insulation. The attic was bigger than I expected, large enough for someone to crawl around comfortably. But there was no sign of movement, no animals, no footprints, nothing disturbed. Then something caught my eye in the far corner, a small object sitting near the wall. I climbed fully into the attic and walked toward it. The wooden boards creaked softly beneath my feet. As I got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a backpack. My stomach tightened, because it definitely wasn't mine. The bag looked worn, dirty, like it had been used recently. I knelt down slowly and opened it. Inside were a few items: a flashlight, a half-empty water bottle, and several granola bar wrappers. Someone had been living in my attic. My heart started racing again. This wasn't a random break-in. This was someone who had been staying here, above my head. While I slept, I quickly looked around the attic again. My flashlight beam moved across the wooden beams, the insulation, the corners. Then I noticed something else. Near the center of the attic floor was a small square opening, about 2 feet wide, covered loosely with a wooden board. I carefully moved the board aside, and my stomach dropped instantly. It was a hole in the attic floor, directly above my bedroom. I leaned closer and shined the flashlight through the opening. The beam passed through the gap and illuminated my room below. My bed, my desk, my nightstand. Someone up here could see everything. My hands started shaking again, because that meant whoever had been in this attic had been watching me, night after night. While I slept, then I noticed something even worse. Near the edge of the hole, there was a small black device attached to the beam. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. It was a camera. The tiny lens pointed directly into my bedroom. My entire body went cold. Someone had been recording me from inside my own house. Then suddenly, I heard a sound behind me, a faint movement, with creaking softly. I turned around slowly, my flashlight beam shaking as it swept across the attic. For a split second, I thought I saw something move in the shadows, near the far wall. Then the beam stopped, and my heart nearly stopped with it, because standing in the darkest corner of the attic was a man, tall, thin, completely silent, watching me. And the worst part, he had been standing there the entire time. For a moment, neither of us moved. The man stood in the far corner of the attic, half hidden in the shadows. My flashlight beam shook in my hand as it pointed directly at him. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked calm, almost like he had been expecting me. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "You're not supposed to be up here." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But the attic ladder was behind him, between me and the only way out. My heart started racing. "Why are you in my house?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes moved toward the hole in the attic floor, the one looking directly into my bedroom. Then he looked back at me. "I was here first," he said quietly. My brain struggled to process what he meant. "This is my house," I said. "I bought it 3 months ago." The man shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You moved into my house." A cold chill ran down my spine. "That doesn't make any sense." The man stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, just enough of the light to reveal more of his face. He looked tired, pale, like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "I used to live here," he said, "before the bank took it." Suddenly the pieces started falling into place. The empty attic, the backpack, the food wrappers. He had been living here secretly, after losing the house. "But that doesn't explain the camera," I said, my voice shaking, "or the hole in the floor." His expression changed. Something darker passed across his face. Then he smiled slightly. "That's not for you," he said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the hole in the floor. "Look again." I slowly turned my flashlight back toward the opening. The beam passed through the gap in the wood and into my bedroom. At first, everything looked normal. My bed, my desk, my chair. Then suddenly, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was someone standing in my bedroom, a figure, right beside my bed, completely still, watching the attic, watching us. My heart nearly stopped. Who is that?" The man in the attic didn't look surprised. In fact, he almost looked relieved. "That," he said quietly, "is the reason I never left." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. I stared down to the hole in the attic floor, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam landed directly on the figure standing beside my bed. For a moment, the person didn't move. They just stood there, looking up, looking straight at the attic. A cold wave of fear ran through my entire body, because the person in my bedroom wasn't the man standing behind me in the attic. It was someone else. "Who is that?" I whispered. My voice felt weak. The man behind me stepped closer to the hole and looked down. Then he sighed. The kind of tired sigh someone makes when they've been dealing with something for too long. "I told you," he said quietly. "That's why I stayed." My mind raced. "What do you mean?" The man rubbed his face with one hand. For the first time, he looked scared. Not of me, of the person downstairs. "I started hearing the footsteps about 6 months ago," he said. "Down in the hallway, in the kitchen, sometimes in the living room." My stomach tightened. That's exactly what I heard. He nodded slowly. "At first, I thought someone was breaking in, so I set up a camera." He pointed toward the small black camera aimed at my bedroom. "I wanted to catch whoever it was." My throat felt dry. "And did you?" He looked down through the hole again. Then he said something that made my entire body go cold. It wasn't someone breaking in. The figure in my bedroom suddenly moved. Just slightly. A small shift of the head. Still staring up. Still completely silent. My grip on the flashlight tightened. "Then what is it?" The man in the attic hesitated, like he didn't want to say the words out loud. "It only shows up at night," he said finally. "Usually around 2 or 3 in the morning." My heart skipped. 2:36 a.m., the exact time I heard the footsteps. "It walks through the house," he continued, slowly, like it's exploring. My breathing became shallow, and then it stops in the bedroom, right beside the bed, exactly where the figure was standing now. And it just watches. A heavy silence filled the attic. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then suddenly, the figure downstairs tilted its head. Slowly, almost unnaturally. My chest tightened. "Does it know we're here?" The man whispered something that made things even worse. "Yes." The figure suddenly stepped closer to the bed, then closer to the hole in the ceiling. My flashlight beam shook violently, because now I could see its face more clearly. It looked almost human, but something about it was wrong. The skin looked pale, too pale, and the eyes looked completely empty. Then it smiled, not a normal smile. Something thin, something unnatural. The man beside me whispered urgently, "We need to leave." But before either of us could move, the figure downstairs raised one arm, slowly, pointing directly at the attic. And then it spoke. Its voice sounded quiet, almost like a whisper echoing through the house. "You're not alone up there." My entire body froze, because that sentence made no sense. There were only 2 of us in the attic, me and the man beside me. But then the floorboards behind us creaked. Slowly, deliberately, another set of footsteps. Inside the attic, right behind us. The man and I turned at the same time. My flashlight beam swung wildly through the darkness, and for a split second, I saw another figure standing in the far corner, watching us. Before you leave, take a second to think about this. What would you do if you heard footsteps in your house, knowing you live alone? Would you check the hallway? Would you call police? Or would you pretend you didn't hear anything and try to go back to sleep? Some people say old houses make strange noises at night. Others say our minds can play tricks on us when it's quiet. But sometimes the sounds we hear in the dark aren't our imagination. Sometimes there really is someone there. If this story gave you chills, make sure you like the video so more people can discover these hidden stories. And if you enjoy mysterious, creepy, and suspenseful stories like this, subscribe to Hidden Stories by Banki and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Also, tell me in the comments, what would you have done when you heard those footsteps? Your answer might be very different from everyone else's. Until the next story, stay safe. And remember, sometimes the scariest thing isn't the noise you hear. It's realizing you're not alone when you thought you were.